We got a lot of people in here. How's everybody doing today? Still letting people in.
Good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. All right, I think that's everybody so far. Well, thanks everybody for joining the Hormone Happy Hour. I'm gonna give it
No, quit being the
about 2 or 3 minutes before we get rolling. Make sure everybody has an opportunity to join. How's everybody's week going so far?
Going good.
Head nods. So yeah, hopefully going good.
It's going.
city. Yeah, going.
It's a week.
How's yours?
It's going pretty good. Thank you so much for asking. Um, just clicking away on my computer. I feel like that's all I do all day. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. All right. So we've been doing different topics every week here on this call, and one of the things I see a lot with women coming through this program is issues with adrenal hormones, thyroid hormone, and gut issues. Of course, we have a lot of women coming through here and postmenopausal, but we also see this triage of dysfunction and probably 90% of clients. So I wanted to kind of unpack the adrenal thyroid gut connection and how those systems work together. Um, so some of the things that I wanted to cover is kind of like big picture is nothing happens in isolation with hormones. I think of it in almost like a symphony. And if someone is playing off tune, it can throw the whole band off. What I see most women coming into the program is, oh, I just have a thyroid issue or it's just a GI issue. And as we peel layers back, we start to see the interconnection. So I wanted to um, walk through some of the points with these and then potentially ways to resolve them. Also loop in the coaches. They have lots of insight in that as well. Um, got a couple more people popping in. Yeah, so just curious if anybody wants to drop in the chat. Do you have issues with adrenal, thyroid, guts? Is there one specific that stands out? Would love to unpack that with you after we review everything, but always curious on who we're talking to and then potentially some of the symptoms going on. Um, but kind of looking at big picture, I have this diagram that I made. I like pictures, so we'll start with this and things that intertwine. So your adrenal glands. Things that we think about with the adrenals are going to regulate cortisol and stress response. Other things I think people miss with the adrenal glands is they're also going to release catecholamines. What is that? Things like adrenaline and noradrenaline, and those are immediate responses. Cortisol is a secondary response to those stress hormones. But things that adrenals will impact is the regulation of blood sugar, and controlling inflammation. I think a lot of times we get the idea that cortisol's bad. If you're on social media for more than 5 minutes and you are kind of your algorithm's hormone related, everybody's talking about high cortisol and how that can be problematic. And there's caveats with that. Cortisol is an essential stress hormone. That and insulin are two hormones that you cannot live without. You will die in the absence of cortisol, and you will die in the absence of insulin. So, um, the things that we want to think about, and I've talked about this a few times, is the diurnal rhythm of cortisol. So, cortisol should raise in the morning, should slowly come down into a trough into the evening. what I see more times than not is we have uh, spikes at the wrong time, and flatline cortisol in the morning is something I would say we see a lot of females coming in here dealing with. So, kind of looking at systems and the adrenal link. So, chronic stress creates cortisol dysregulation. That in turn is going to bleed into thyroid. That is going to bleed into gut permeability. So, symptoms to mention: fatigue, poor stress tolerance. I was speaking with somebody yesterday and we were talking about her stress tolerance, and she just feels like she could not multitask anymore. She's highly stressed. Little stressors really accumulate and cause her body to shut down. So, unpacking that with this client, it sounded like she had some adrenal disorders. When we look at the other things associated with that, midsection weight gain, I would say that's probably a complaint I hear very frequently from clients is the amount of weight gain in the midsection. Cortisol can be a piece of that puzzle for sure. And afternoon crashes. So, you get your 8 hours of sleep, and then come midday, you feel like you can lay down, go take another nap. Um, some other things that I think people may be able to relate to is feeling more alert at night versus than in the morning. So I've been guilty of this in the past of, thinking that I'm just a night owl and I have the most energy at night. But a lot of times we train our stress response to become abnormal, and we're not making cortisol in the morning, and then we peak in the evening, and then we're up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then we just repeat that vicious cycle. So adrenals are going to play a big piece. I feel like a lot of times people don't know how to regulate adrenals. It's a lot more than just adaptogens and herbs. We really want to look at lifestyle management, sun exposure, stress mitigation, and stress management techniques are going to be huge here. You want to think about your adrenal hormones. That initial signal happens in the brain. So we want to make sure that the brain, as far as inflammation, is in a good spot, because that's going to be the initial phases of the signal of the production of cortisol. So does anybody have any questions on that, or coaches, do you have anything that you'd like to add in that before I get into the thyroid piece?
I have questions, but I don't know where to start. You have to raise your hand or something. I feel like I need my own session.
All right, we're gonna keep going. I'm gonna come into the thyroid piece next. So thyroid, again, is probably one of the things I see mismanaged quite a bit. And first thing I like to say is I'm not poking holes in prescribers' treatment modalities, but there's a lot more than just replacing thyroid hormone. Really, again, we want to look at the adrenal gland, see if there's impact there. Then we can get into thyroid. So thyroid's function as a whole, its metabolism control is probably one of the biggest pieces. So we want to think about thyroid hormone, specifically T3, which we can see down here. You need T4 to convert into T3. That's direct impact on energy and energy production. So if you've done comprehensive labs and you had low levels of T3 and you have issues losing weight, that is going to be one of the biggest things that I see. So when we look at metabolism control and energy production, what tends to go wrong? So that stress and inflammatory response at the top is going to then bleed down into blocking T4's conversion into T3. So that is going to be one of the things we want to address instead of just taking levothyroxine. I'm sure I have somebody on this call who's been prescribed levothyroxine from their PCP and has no benefits of taking that thyroid medication. But you're going to need enough nutrient support to help with that conversion of T4 to T3. And then you're also going to need to regulate your stress response. So things that we can see with symptoms associated with hypothyroidism: cold hands, cold feet, hair loss, weight gain, and then slowed digestion is something that I see quite a bit. So that could be constipation, bloating. Um, the thing is, a lot of times your primary care will just run a TSH on you and not look at any of those other markers. So you may have gotten your labs done and you think that you have a thyroid disorder and your doctor says your labs come back normal, but you still feel hypothyroid. We really want to make sure we're unpacking all of these layers. So last, and in my opinion, the most important piece, and allopathic medicine doesn't really do any deep invasive types of testing for the microbiota in the gut. We do GI maps here. There's a lot of different GI testings that you can do. But when we look at the gut, functions of the gut, maybe common sense to a lot of people, but nutrient absorption is probably the biggest thing. So if you're deficient in B vitamins, zinc, magnesium, iron, I think a lot about like, hey, we probably should support the gut. And sorry, I just let someone in. I lost my train of thought. We want to think about immune balance. So your gut is, I don't know, I think it's like 80%. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, of your immunity is housed in the GI tract. So gut's going to have a big piece on your immune balance, and then hormone metabolism. That's another piece. So you have something called estrobolome. It's basically a uh, organism in the gut that can upregulate and cause you to reabsorb things like estrogen. So the gut's going to play a big role here. What tends to go wrong? So again, we'll look at this triage of things. The adrenals, creating stress and an inflammatory response is then going to bleed down to the thyroid gland and potentially slow digestion. And then that is going to create an environment for poor gut health, which can raise inflammation. Again, which can go back up to the top and trigger cortisol. So this triage of things happens pretty regularly. Symptoms associated with like the gut, bloating, constipation, food sensitivities. So if you're in your 40s and you just developed some weird food sensitivities, we kind of want to go upstream and look at all of these other areas. And skin issues. I had eczema for like 15 years. I had biopsies done on it. I was put on steroidal creams. I had leaky gut. I had high histamines. And once I addressed those things, my eczema went away. No dermatologist was able to fix that for me. And, you really want to think deeper layers than just taking a Band-Aid or using something to suppress your immune response. So yeah, I feel like for myself, if I'm really stressed out, I do notice my digestion potentially being slower. If I'm trying to cram food before a meeting or in between meetings, that can digest really poorly. So like thinking about simple things you could do to maybe improve your digestion: slow down, eat your food, sit, don't be on Instagram or your laptop or on the phone, chew your food, smell your food, eat it slowly. So yeah, I think that those are some of the big things when we look at the interconnection of that. And basically, just kind of going full circle here, explaining the loop. Stress is going to create adrenal strain, which is going to create thyroid suppression, which is going to slow down the gut motility, which is going to increase inflammation, which is going to create more adrenal strain. Um, I think of it basically like the analogy of like three coworkers. So, if one calls in sick and the other two are overworked, they get tired and cranky and they don't do their job so well. So, um, really looking at all of this in one is going to help you come up with a root cause and a plan. Even if you're not a client here with the program, just thinking bigger picture and not looking at things in isolation are going to be very helpful. So, oh, I got one more. I'm going to let her in. So practical takeaways. So if we're starting at the top again, morning sunlight, breath work, stress management, walking outside is great. We can look at key nutrients to support thyroid function: selenium, magnesium, tyrosine, vitamin C. All of those things can be helpful. Um, Other things I would think about is blood sugar management, especially if you have adrenal issues. A lot of times I see dysregulation with blood sugar, but there's not insulin resistance, but you have a super high waking glucose response on your blood test. You want to think about balancing your meals, fats, fiber, protein. Those things are going to be helpful. Not skipping meals. It's good to be hungry. It's not great to fast all day, especially if your body's already stressed out. So being able to feed yourself throughout the days, I would say most people historically are chronically under eating. I don't know if coaches want to raise their hand and agree with me, but I would say 95% of the women coming in this program are under eating all macronutrients. Protein, obviously, that's a really hard one for almost everybody to get enough protein in. I think people are scared of carbohydrates and, potentially scared of fats. All of those things have a place here in making up hormones and supporting your body's processes. So you need a balanced diet. What Charlotte needs is going to be different than what Lisa needs based off of exercise demand, based off of height and weight. But that's really where having a coach and being able to fine tune and tailor that for you really comes in. I would say most clients coming in probably need to spend some time in a rebuild maintenance phase, getting your metabolism up to an adequate place for us to be able to pull away. What I see more times than not is most women are going to be very low in calories, uh, outputting a ton of energy expenditure and wondering why that scale is not moving. So being able to feed your body, get it out of this stressed environment, making sure you have enough nutrients and your digestion is up to par so you can absorb them, then your body's willing to lose weight. So that's kind of my stance on it. I don't know if coaches would agree with me on that, but I would say that's really where I start with both men and women. I coach a lot of men as well. And more times than not, this is the triage. I also work with them. Let's see. And then looking at like gut support. And again, this is just broad speaking. So don't go run and buy all these supplements if I'm just talking through them. Fiber is going to have a place in this. Fiber is going to help regulate blood sugar. It's going to help you with a bowel movement. It can also cause some issues. So again, take it with a grain of salt, but probiotics, digestive enzymes, zinc carnosine, glutamine, all of those things can be beneficial based off of what you need. Um, does anybody have any questions, clients, coaches? I'd love to pause for a second. I've been talking for 20 minutes. I'd like to catch my breath and see if I can answer, if any of the coaches can answer any questions for you.
I have a question, Justin. For some of the things you're talking about with like, yes, all these weird changes that all of a sudden are happening once you hit 40. Um, there's something more recently also I'm noticing like feeling really thir I'm one of those people who has been on at the extra low calories the same way that you've been saying. But I'm also noticing like I don't know what to call it. It's kind of you're feeling like really, really thirsty, but you're drinking water. I'm drinking water all the time. But even while I'm drinking it, I'm kind of feeling thirsty still. I was wondering when you were talking about the supplements and stuff, if you had any ideas on that or thoughts on why that happens or what to do with it.
Yeah, I think another thing a lot of people we've been kind of we demonize is enough salt in your diet. I would say most people probably under consume sodium because we're afraid it's going to raise our blood pressure or cause us to retain water. So I would think making sure you have an adequate amount of sodium. A good way to think about that is if you're exercising, you're probably going to need some additional salt because you're going to sweat that out. Granted, you're eating a well-balanced diet with fruits and vegetables, you're probably getting adequate amounts of potassium. But I see a lot of people under consuming salt. And I'm not saying you need 10 grams of salt a day. But some sea salt or some iodized sea salt can go a long ways for you. Blood sugar is something else that I think potentially you would want to look at there if you're chronically thirsty. But the lowest hanging fruit, in my opinion, is just making sure mineral balance is adequate. Um, Other things that can be helpful is electrolyte powders can be beneficial if you have a high quality one. I like Relight. Charlotte, Lisa, Sophie, do you have any additional insights on potentially, issues with thirst and with adequate water consumption? Is anything else that I'm missing there or anything else that you would recommend?
I agree with you. Always go to the electrolytes first, especially the salt. That was a big game changer for me when I started adding much more salt to my water every morning. So I like to know you could try this. You just do like 16 ounces of warm water with like 1/8 teaspoon of salt, some lemon, apple cider vinegar. You could potentially get an electrolyte pack if you wanted, but sometimes I like to just singularly do just individual types of electrolytes to see like, oh, that was what it was, if I just do one versus all. But sometimes that's too much for people. But yeah, that's what I try to singularly pick it out. And then I find that I'm pretty low on potassium too. Definitely low on potassium if my salt is gone. So usually those two are pretty in sync with each other.
Yeah, I would say the sodium aspect, what do you recommend for some of your clients? Is there a specific amount of grams or 1/8 teaspoons you recommend in general? Is there like some hard rules or rough guidelines that you like? Any of you? I have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear maybe your recommendations.
I generally just say start out with 1/8 extra teaspoon a day. And then if you find that you feel some benefit, but you're still not there, then bump that up to twice a day, one in the morning and one in the early afternoon. Also to follow cortisol patterns, because the adrenals, if you're really stressed out, are wasting minerals like crazy. So for example, I'll take like 500 milligrams of magnesium glycinate a day, and I'll take 1/4 teaspoon or more of sea salt a day. And then potassium, I try to just get through food. Try to, because I don't know that I love supplementing with high amounts of potassium, but again, it's up to each individual person and what works well for them.
I think you have a good point on adrenals. I was going to go there next. Is like you have to have salt present to have an adequate stress response, and the magnesium is a huge piece. So, for anybody even does just like a basic set of labs, you could look at something like an alkaline phosphatase. It's on your complete metabolic panel. Every doctor runs one of those. I tend to see that really low in individuals who may be chronically stressed. That's a good sign that you're low in magnesium. And magnesium can be hard on the gut. So I think that if I'm looking at titrating magnesium for somebody, you could be somewhere from like 100 milligrams upwards to like 800 milligrams. I do about 800 milligrams of magnesium a day, just kind of based off of my size. And I need that. I actually notice that sleep and recovery, even muscle contractions, are not as pronounced if I'm not have enough adequate magnesium. That sodium piece is going to be important. Again, I'm probably an outlier with sodium, but I probably do 5 to 6 grams of sodium a day. I salt all of my meals. I have salt water in the morning, and then I have about a gram of salt after I exercise because I'm training really hard and I sweat. So I want to make sure I'm able to replenish that. That may be different for everybody, but you really want to think about not being afraid of salting your food. And not, I think a lot of times seasonings can be lower in sodium. So you're like, hey, I season my food, but you want to make sure there's actually sodium in whatever type of seasoning that you're using. I will add additional sodium into that. So those are good places to start. Um, if we answered your question, do we have any other questions we can answer? And we're on this adrenal thyroid gut connection, but you can literally ask us any questions. I like to have a topic.
Hi, I have a question. I was talking with my coach this morning, And okay, I'm postmenopausal. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear
Oh,
you.
good. Oh, good. Okay. And the last 2 years, I'm 70 years old now. I've had arthritis in my joints, like in my hips, and a little bit in my shoulders and elbows and wrists and stuff. But the last 2 years has gotten really bad in my hands. And I went to a rheumatologist, and I do not have the any kind of, it's not autoimmune, and I do not have rheumatoid arthritis. I have what they call, um, it's uh, it's a type of osteoarthritis, erosive osteoarthritis. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of peptide or remedy that I can use that could help it. I'm set up to go see an orthopedic specialist in about 4 or 5 months. This guy is like the top hand guy in Sonoma County. I live in California, and uh, and that's all he does. And everybody swears by him. But I'm wondering, that's a long time to wait. And I've had this problem for it's progressive, and I want to lift weights, and it's hard for, I can't even know. I have pliers. I have several sets of pliers in my kitchen just to open up bottles because I can't use my index finger and my thumb together to apply pressure to open anything. And I know that's going to impact my longevity, and I want to combat that.
That's a good question, Nancy. Um, things that I would think about if you are in menopause, and sometimes I see people kind of going down this path of RA, kind of looking at other forms of arthritis. If you are on bioidentical hormones, and I've met with you, I just am not going to talk about your specific health. So,
Okay.
things that what I would say is making sure that you have adequate amounts of estradiol. Your estrogen is therapy is well managed if you are using something like that. A lot of times, what I see, and I'll give you a great example. My mom is one of the hardest workers I know. She's a bus driver for the school. She works in special needs. Her hands were aching and aching due to driving the bus, and us getting her estradiol within an adequate range actually really helped with some of those arthritic symptoms that she's having. So that's the first thing that I would cross off is like if you are using bioidentical hormones, I would make sure that you are well covered there. You have suppression of your FSH, and that basically your brain is telling your ovaries there's enough estradiol present. That would be kind of baseline. You want to make sure that's covered. That's also going to bleed into that uh, preservation of bone. That's going to be very important for you for your longevity. Um, if we're getting more into the realm of peptides, absolutely, there's several things that you could look at. We've talked about it here on this call a couple times. BPC-157. It's a body protective compound 157. It's a peptide. It's actually made in the gut. You can take it in larger amounts in an oral or an injectable format. This peptide creates something called angiogenesis. That's a fancy term for just increasing blood supply to troubled areas. What would that be? Ligaments and tendons is what I see more times than not. Our muscles tend to be rich in blood just because of the vascular system, but our ligaments and tendons don't. So this peptide actually goes to those specific areas and increases blood supply. So that could take some inflammation. It could help just kind of lubricate those areas and strengthen it up. So that's one thing I would think about.
Mhm.
The other thing that's really cool if we're getting into the realm of peptides is GHK-CU. It's a copper peptide. My father-in-law, he is a avid jujitsu guy, and he tore his bicep, I think, like 10 weeks ago. And we were using injectable GHK with BPC. Within 10 weeks, he was released from his PT to just start doing some basic band work. And he's 60. So they were like, I've never see this. This is amazing. I don't know what you're doing, but so there is a lot of things you could do.
Oh,
What
cool.
I'll do is I'm going to drop this here in the chat. GHK-CU, you could look at that. BPC-157. Those are two that are really awesome. And then We just want to make sure we're covering baseline things as far as your hormonal status. Uh,
Mhm.
I understand it can be frustrating waiting for a specialist. I have some clients I work with in Canada, and there's like upwards to a year wait, if you're trying to get in to do something. And a lot of times people need resolution sooner than that. So you want to just have some things in your belt if uh,
Right.
getting any improvement. These are things that you can definitely do. If you are a part of the hormone program, First Optimal can definitely help you get pharmaceutical versions of that GHK, that BPC-157. Those things will definitely do some wonders for you.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Absolutely. I had a couple messages in the chat. Shannon, thanks for joining again. Yeah, the ALP, what I tend to see a lot of times, physicians really get more worried about alkaline phosphatase being high. I can show some stress on the liver. You only see that with chronically inflamed liver and or bone turnover. So if somebody is as a kid is going through puberty or a child's hitting a growth spurt, ALP will be elevated. But when it's chronically low, there's really nothing that anybody does for that. So your magnesium, your zinc is also going to play a role. We talked about that. The other thing that I just like to have people think about, ALP can also be low if you're low in stomach acid. Um, a lot of times that zinc and that magnesium, and those are going to be extracted from food sources. So supplementing magnesium is a great way to do that. But if you are um, doing those things and your ALP does not elevate, you want to make sure that you have enough stomach acid. We can look at that through a GI map. We can make sure that H. pylori isn't present. Your elastase 1 is in an adequate range. Those are some things that could also play a role. Just kind of thinking big picture. I have another one in here from KTM. I was just reading about the banning of natural desiccated thyroid. Will that affect compounded pharmacies from producing it as well? Kind of part two, is it possible to work towards being able to balance hormones enough not to have to take thyroid medication? I do not want to take synthetic thyroid. I hear really awful things. Um, there is quite a few things that you could potentially try in regards to balancing your thyroid naturally. Kind of goes back to this triage of things up top. I would say I'm not really opposed to thyroid medication. I'm personally on thyroid medication. I need it. But for someone who is not wanting to go that route, totally understand that. I would kind of look upstream, look at your adrenal glands, make sure that cortisol is produced in adequate amounts. You could confirm that through salivary or urinary cortisol testing, not looking at a blood test of cortisol because it's not going to show free forms. And then we want to look at thyroid production. So we want to make sure that we are covered from that zinc, that magnesium, the iodine, the selenium. So you're already doing all of those things, then I would probably then shift over to the right and then look at gut. If you're supplementing all those things, but you're not having any elevations in numbers, it could be a nutrient absorption issue. To answer your first part of your question, because I jumped over it, in regards to FDA banning natural desiccated thyroid, that must be relatively new. I'm pretty up to date with compounding pharmacies. I work with a couple. I was actually just in a portal. I've not seen anything of that yet, but doesn't mean it's not true. It may be a potential brand. So major brands in desiccated thyroid are going to be like your Armors, your NP thyroids, or they may be removing just a generic desiccated. I would assume something like an Armor would not be removed because that is one of the drugs that is approved for billing and coding with insurance. So I'm assuming they will not remove that, but it could be some of the generics. Um, I would have to do a little bit more digging on that. Um, I hope I answered your question. If not, feel free to chime in here. Awesome, Shannon. I see that. I read it yesterday. Said it will be Armor, MP, etc. Interesting, including by 2026. So things that I would think about here in regards to armor, NP, and the reasons I'm not a huge fan of those drugs, and this is just my personal stance, I'm just one person, so take it for what it is. Um, the thing with glandular products, they extract the thyroid gland from a pig and they grind it up and they hope that it's adequate amounts of T4 and T3. You really can't get precision dosing with that. I like your dog, Sophie. And um, you really want to think about sometimes specifically the desiccated products, you may get uneven amounts of T4 and T3. It may work great for some people. I see some people use it and like it. It's just, it did not work for me. And, the patients that I've served through different telemedicine clinics and then my own telemedicine clinic, I tend to see it not being the most effective form of thyroid medication. But it just depends. It may work great for you. I'm sure that somebody is going to petition that and want to keep those desiccated products around. The FDA likes to get in and shove everybody around and do things. That's basically what happens in compounding all the time. And again, it's neither here nor there. I don't really care what the FDA does, but we'll have to see that fully come into fruition if that happens. So it's potential. Let's see. Per my endocrinologist, the issue with natural, they're locked in ratios. You'll need something different than you need to uh, get overloaded on T4 to get the T3 out that you need. Yeah, I agree with that, Shannon. It is locked in ratios, but those ratios sometimes are not correct because it's hard to extract that from a gland. Um, my thing with getting overloaded on T4 to get T3 and where a lot of people go wrong with that is if you don't have those cofactors and nutrients down here in this thyroid metabolism piece, you're not going to convert that T4. I see that all the time. Clients may have a reduced TSH, and that's really what primary care is going after is suppressing that TSH response. And you may have adequate amounts of free T4. But you could look at things like T3 uptake and then free T3. Those tend to be really low. Specifically, if we have that adrenal component going on, all that T4 you're taking, you're going to shunt that over to reverse T3, and it's just going to drive that up, and you're still going to be bottomed out on T3. So I would say endocrinologists, PCPs, a lot of times are going to look at things differently than an integrative doctor. As integrative medicine is going to integrate all of these three things together to give best outcomes. Because again, it's not one system; it's a multitude of different systems creating dysfunction. What type of thyroid do I take? I'm happy to talk about it. I've been on thyroid medication for 5 years. I have goiter, so I have some nodules on my thyroid gland. I initially started with Armor Thyroid. It took around 90 milligrams of Armor. I worked up to 120 milligrams of Armor Thyroid. Had suppression in my TSH, had elevations in T4, but I was not able to convert over to T3. So I went to compounded thyroid medicine. I take levothyroxine, which is T4, and then I take lirothyronine, which is T3. I take that in a sustained form, so you can get the T3 in a fast acting. I like the SR, so I don't have to dose it several times throughout the day. Um, that also did not fully raise my T3. My T3 would be in the range for T3 is like 2.8, I think, to 4.4 if we're looking at LabCorp ranges. I could never really get mine up until I addressed my gut issue. I had really bad, I was talking earlier, H. pylori, other things going on, and then making sure I had enough selenium and iodine in my diet. Those were the things that actually stabilized and normalized my thyroid hormone. So those are things that I like to use in conjunction. I think a lot of times people think I just need the meds. I don't want to take the over-the-counters, but our bodies need them. Sometimes those drugs are not efficient enough to convert that. The last thing I'll say in regards to thyroid medicine, it's going to be different from person to person. Some people need different ratios of T4. It does have a longer half-life, so you may need a lower amount of that, so it doesn't fully suppress your TSH, and you may need more T3. or maybe the inverse of that. You need more T4 and less T3. And that's the beauty of diagnostics and compounding pharmacy, and why I'm such an advocate for compounding pharmacy is that they're going to be able to give you exactly what you need. You're going to say, hey, Justin, based off the doctor's recommendation, we're going to drop your levothyroxine 5 micrograms and we're going to increase your levothyroxine 10 micrograms. And they're able to put that in a pill for me versus me going to Walgreens or CVS and they're giving me whatever's available in a commercial form product and I need to score it or break it or take it every other day. So that makes a big difference is being able to get those customized drugs based off of your body's response. Shannon, conversion of T4 to T3 is been my exact problem since 2010. Yeah, I would say, yeah, again, the adrenals, and then we look at gut. I would say, especially if you're already on a compounded T4 and T3, and we want to address those areas, make sure that we can fix the stress response, the nutrient absorption. Those are going to be good places to start to kind of fix that conversion issue. Kim, will First Optimal address thyroid issues if needed? Of course, they do everything. I'm not going to say, I would say they do everything that is within their scope of medicine. So they're not your primary care. They can't, they won't do antibiotics and, call in things for flu, but anything HRT related, thyroid, peptides, sex hormones, sexual wellness medication. They do hair loss, cosmetics. So they're going to be able to cover you in all those fronts um, and address things. So the big thing I think about working through hormones and things is, say you get your bioidenticals lined out, those are working well, and your thyroid subclinical, and so you're not really high or low, you're kind of low normal maybe. They're able to address the sex hormones, and then you'll revisit your labs again. You're like, well, I feel 60% better. I'm still missing this piece. Then they're able to go in and address that thyroid, whatever else is abnormal. And that's what makes it really helpful to have a medical team kind of work alongside you. I say this probably every week, but you go to your primary care, they give you your thyroid medicine or whatever you're taking, and they're like, all right, I'll see you in a year. And then a year later, you come back and they spend 6 minutes with you. They're like, okay, you're still alive. It looks good. Like your labs are within a normal range. I'll see you again in a year. I think about this as more of like a fine-tuning process over time. You think of your body. I'm gonna use the analogy of a vehicle because that's all that's coming to my head. But we need to change the oil. We need to rotate the tires. Your endocrine system's the same way. You need to get in there, make sure that you are labs look normal, symptoms are being managed. Both of those things are needed together. All right, I think I grabbed all the questions in the chat. Do I have any more questions? I have about 15 minutes here and be happy to answer anything else that anybody has. And while we're waiting here, I'm going to actually, Nancy, I don't know if you are on your computer, but maybe Davey can put this in the notes.
Oh, I can pull it up on my cell phone because I have my cell phone with I have my little iPad here. So if you email or text it to me, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to drop it here, and I don't know if coaches have this, but this is a handout I like to give people on BPC-157.
Oh.
This is super helpful if your ears perked up when I was talking about peptides. And I believe this study is from 2018. Let me pull it up and I'll show you guys. So this has been around for quite some time. I have lots of BPC out of my camera here in my mini fridge to the left. But BPC-157, so the angiogenic growth factors, gastrointestinal tract healing. You can see bone, ligaments. It's very, very interesting. Some of the big things I see is again, kind of creating that blood supply in areas where you may lack that. So GI lining, ligaments, tendons. I would say there is some limited human data here on BPC. Most of the peptides are going to be more in this infant stage of medicine. We're talking 15, 20 years as if we look at antibiotics, I don't know, 100, 200 years, something like that. So not a ton of clinical or human data. But what I can say is I see a lot of anecdotal reports from people in a clinical setting. So outside of like the gastric healing, the other interesting pieces with BPC-157 is the ability to regenerate the liver. It's very good if you have any type of liver damage. I take it as just kind of a prophylactic a couple times a week to reduce inflammation and help with GI healing. So I dropped that in there if anybody's interested. I'm a big nerd, so I like to read all that stuff. Maybe someone else will find that interesting. So yeah, let's see. When taking supplements, how do you know it's time to stop taking something? Is there a good general rule of thumb? That's a great question. And I actually met with a client yesterday. She had been doing some some supplements to manage blood sugar. And for some reason, she just quit taking them. And we actually redid her labs. And it had been quite some time, maybe a year later. She had quit 3 months after using them. And I was really surprised that nothing had changed on her blood work, but she didn't know she was supposed to continue taking them. So I think it depends on what you're working on. My big thought on that is testing and not guessing is probably like some of the top things I would say. If you're working on maybe regulating blood sugar, and I'm just giving examples, cholesterol, I'd want to say like, hey, are those supplements actually working? I'm going to recheck my fasted glucose, my A1C, my insulin. Oh, I've seen a 20-point reduction over 3 months. Are you within a normal range or are you still abnormal? If you're abnormal, you may want to continue taking those even if you've had some improvements. Say you're well within a normal range there. I would probably make a list of that supplement and be like, hey, this was actually very beneficial for me. Maybe I'm prone to type 2 diabetes. Maybe I'm prone to high cholesterol. Those are things that you may need to use off and on. Again, we want to think of this more as a maintenance analogy. Things like magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, I would say those are almost like non-negotiables. We all should probably be taking some form of uh, D. I rarely see people have adequate amounts of D, enough magnesium. But I would say potentially looking at lab testing to solidify that. If you're looking at things to help manage stress and sleep, say sleep has improved dramatically, you could take it out for a couple weeks and see like, hey, was that really helping me, or am I in a good enough spot now? Are my adrenals healed enough where I don't need X, Y, or Z? But testing is the best way. I know sometimes that's expensive. So I would potentially maybe take it out for a little bit and then see how I feel. I like to keep a log of how I'm feeling, what I'm working on. That helps me reflect. I got a lot of things going on. So sometimes I'm the last thing that I think about. So maybe I'll take a quick note and revisit that a couple weeks later. I hope to answer your question. I know it's not a direct thing. The thing you may notice is like the thing I love about hormones is there's no concrete answers. It's not black, it's white, it's an abstract. And that's what makes this really interesting. I'm sure all the coaches here agree with me. That's what keeps our job interesting and new every day. I could not go into the office and click the same button every day or build the same piece of machinery. I gotta do something different every day. And that's why I love this. Kim, good question. What are your thoughts on possible negative side effects and safety of using peptides? I think it depends on what peptides we're using. I would say, if we're looking, because I'm using BPC as an example here, there's no toxic limit with BPC, and it is, found in the body. So I would say it's fairly safe. I think where people can go overboard are with the mitochondria peptides, and I really like mitochondria-based peptides. I was talking about them a couple weeks ago. But you can overstimulate your mitochondria, basically meaning creating too much energy and causing them to be so efficient that they can actually create inflammation. So I think that if I were hesitant to be using things. Um, Mitochondrial peptides can be overdone. I think a lot of times people think more is better. I take mitochondrial peptides, I love them, but you can totally overdo them. You can get tachycardia where your heart's racing. You could feel really wired or have insomnia. They are direct output of energy. So those are the ones that I think are probably can be problematic. The classification of like healing peptides, if that's BPC or thymic peptides, they tend to be very safe. The thing I like to think about with either one of those is we actually make those in the body. So they tend to be pretty safe. More data to come out on that in the future. The thing I always like to pose to people is if you have chronic inflammation or you have some sort of autoimmune disorder, um, are you willing to live with that? Or are you potentially open to using some peptides to improving that? And that's something that each person's going to have to make their own decision on. But if I'm not feeling well or I have something torn or I'm trying to heal from something, me personally, I'm willing to take that risk and use those things because I want to feel my best. But that's each person's decision. So I hope I answered your question with that. All right. Got time for one more if anybody has it. Would love to take it. If not, I'm going to quit talking. All right. Well, I think this was a great call. I want to thank all of you for. Hold on. I got one more. Okay. Same companies making peptides that you drink, are those effective? What I would say, it depends. The thing is with any peptide, any like pharmaceutical grade peptide, compounding pharmacy has to make that. A lot of these websites you see online selling peptides, they'll have a big stamp right on the bottle and it'll say not approved for human use. And you may wonder, like, what's the difference between those? It's the API or the quality assurance with that drug. Why pharmaceutical grade peptides are so expensive. That pharmacy has license with the DEA, the FDA. They have to go in and inspect, clean those vats, take out all of the toxins that build up when making those peptides. When you buy them from research grade sites, some guy probably in his bathroom mixing it in a tub. He's not cleaning anything up. They're not illegal, they're gray area, but I don't think I want to put that in my body. So, um, some of the other things that you may see around peptides, people market collagen as a peptide. It is a peptide, it's amino acid, but they're different types of peptides. So I think it depends on what you're looking at. Unfortunately, with social media and advertising, we're all, I'm guilty of this too. We're all like prey, basically. They can get you to buy a bunch of stuff. So I would do my research on that, see what you're taking it, why you're taking it, and then see if it's just essential and non-essential amino acids, or is it actually a pharmaceutical grade peptide? Some peptides can be absorbed in the gut, like BPC, but a lot of things like growth hormone peptides, those things do not live in the digestive tract. So it just depends on what you're looking at. I hope I answered your question. Absolutely. All right. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Good having all of you. We'll be here again next week, and I'll send this over to be reloaded. Hope everybody has a great day.
You too.
You too. See
Bye.
ya.